Hey, welcome to the Durango Vineyard. My name's DJ. I'm glad you're here with us. This week's topic, we're continuing our series called Awake My Soul, with the idea that Jesus came to give us full life, life to the fullest, and that involves an awoken soul. And specifically last month, we talked about that you are free in Christ. And we got to talking in our home group about this idea of what does freedom mean in a world that makes it so hard to be free with our speech. There's so much contention and divisiveness, and it just becomes so hard to figure out where is God in all of it. And so today I'm taking a risk. I'm excited to hear what you have to think about this. But basically I'm going to say today, where is Jesus amidst all the contention of today? And is it possible that he could lead to us being awoken? So sit back and enjoy. I'm excited to see how your conversations go and to see what you think. God bless you. What a world and what a time to live in this world. Have you thought that lately? With the pandemic and with our political crises and with the Black Lives Matter movement and some of the other unrest that we see around our world. But have you wondered, where is God in all of this? And I can tell you I have. And today what I want to do is I want to bridge into the idea of how does Jesus feel about this world? Let's just set this over here for a little bit. I want to teach you a little bit about how I read Scripture. There's a word to describe reading Scripture through the lens of Christ called Christotelic. And what that word just basically means is that everything we read, the key is in Jesus and His words. And so sometimes the only things that as we read in the Old Testament or the New Testament or Paul's words, or we've got 66 different books in this baby, right? It makes sense through reading, basically reading Christ into it. Now you may, I don't know, that may just sound like strange to you, like, okay, so what does that mean practically? Well, I want to explain what I've been doing lately, and this is just how God has led me this year. There's a verse that you've heard me talk about over and over in the church if you've been watching any of our sermons, and it's the story of the prodigal son found in Luke 11. We're going to read it today. And basically what I've been doing is when I encounter something difficult in life, I then read this passage, or I remind myself of the passage of the prodigal sons, and I sort of interpret, okay, how does that help me make sense of who God is, who Jesus is, and what He thinks about this situation? Do you see what I'm doing? I'm using it as an interpretive key. And what's crazy is over and over, I'm finding Jesus right in the middle of these controversial and difficult subjects. So today, as a practice towards doing this, I actually want to look at the prodigal son as the interpretive key for all of the events that we're experiencing in our life right now. So first we got to get familiar with the story. So let's jump in and read it. It's in Luke 15, starting in verse 11. And this is a story that Jesus told. And He said, "There was a man who had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me a share of the property that's coming to me.' And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had, and he took a journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into the fields to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and yet no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, 'Well, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread? But I perish here with hunger. I will arise, I will go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants." And he arose, and he came to his father. But while he was still a long ways off, his father saw him and felt compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father said to his servants, "Quickly, bring the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this, my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." And they began to celebrate. Now, the older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And when he called one of the servants and asked him what these things meant, he said to him, "Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound." Oh, but he was angry and refused to go in. And his father came out and entreated him. But he answered his father, "Look, these many years I have served you. I've never disobeyed your command. Yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him." And he said to him, "Son, you were always with me, and all that I have is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found." Man, what a powerful story, right? And there's so many layers of complexity to this story. And frankly, we could do series upon series of all the little nuances of the Middle Eastern culture and the story and how it would have been heard by his hearers. And like I said, I've been thinking about this story for a year, finding myself all over in it. Here's what I want to do today. I want to look at the three characters. And then I want to look at what those three characters tell us about the most complex things in our world today. So let's go on this journey together. As I talk, I want you to sort of brainstorm out loud with me. I mean, be thinking in your head, how do you see Christ in this story, in the situations that we're going to talk about? So let's talk about first Black Lives Matter. The movement of black individuals mostly, but then a lot of other ethnicities who have come around them to say these folks have been treated unfairly for years. And let's just acknowledge for a little bit the tension within our world because of this, right? The tension because of the people who are not black, or the people feel accused and not on one side or the other. And let's just remember how divisive this has been over the last year. Riots and all of the court system battles. And I just want us to sit in that tension. And what does this parable tell us about this situation? Well, let's look at these three stories. First, the younger brother. Man, he knew a lot about pain, didn't he? Because he went and squandered his fortune away, and he had to eat with the slop of pigs. And regardless of what got that younger son there, in this story, we find that when we are in pain and we come to our Father, he comes running to us. Now let's look at the older son. And the older son was hurt and appalled and disgusted that he had done all of this work, and yet he was not appreciated by the father in the way that he thought he should be. And let's just recognize that there will always be those who look down their long nose when someone comes running to the Father. Someone in pain who, by the way, when you're in pain, you come with all kinds of pain with you. And let's just recognize that the older brother tendency in all of us is to scoff and to look down on and to judge and to divide ourselves. In fact, the older brother, did you catch it in this story? He said, "That son of yours." He didn't even call him his brother or his name. He separated himself from this. And all along, let's look at the Father. A constant love of peace, or voice of peace, of love and embrace. To who? To both sons. He goes and entreats the older son, and he runs and he embraces the younger son. I think I can see Jesus all over the Black Lives Matter movement in our day. I'll bet if we read this parable over and over with the mind of how should I react, I'll bet we would find all kinds of personal responses, ways that lead us to be like Jesus. All right, let's take another one. Let's take our political crisis. My goodness, what a world we live in with all of the posturing and fighting and arguing and divisiveness and hatredness, the visceralness towards each other, the two-sidedness, the seemingly you're either on this side or the other, the inability to listen to each other. What does this parable tell us about this political crisis? Well, first, let's look at the younger son. The younger son had lost all hope in his ability to create his future, and he returned to the future of the Father. I wonder if sometimes we don't put way too much hope in what we can connive and create. Interestingly enough, through the young son, it was through pleasure and just going to experience life in the best way possible, and yet he couldn't get there. He needed to return to his pops. And what about the older son? Man, the older son was so concerned with getting it right and, making sure that the system worked, and he worked hard and he was there early and he stayed late. And, that didn't really work for him either. Here comes the younger son who had not played by the rules, and the father accepted and embraced him. And all that the older son found himself was on the outside looking in. So often in our desire to do good things for God, we can find ourselves on the outside of what he's actually doing. Oh, and then there's the father who didn't take a position of judgment towards either. Instead, he took a posture of being a non-anxious, engaged presence in the middle of the conflict. Both of the sons came from such different positions, and we never see them reunite. And yet the Father was there for both of them. Man, in our world that's so divided, I wonder if we actually think Jesus takes sides against his other children. And in this parable, we see a God who can somehow hold it all. All right, let's take one more. Let's just keep going. We're on a roll. Let's talk about the pandemic, masks, the vaccine, and just all the sort of divisiveness that's brought. There's been an economic consequence from it all. There's been the social distancing implications. And then there's been all the church ramifications of this. I mean, how do we learn about what Jesus might have thought about this pandemic? I guess what stands out right away to me is both the younger son and the older son gave wealth way too much priority. The younger son uses all this wealth to run away and go wild, thinking that if I just can have fun, my life will be worth it. And the older son, man, he trusted wealth too, but it was in a different way. He was conservative and he worked hard and he did the right things. And all the while, how did the father feel about his money? Somehow, the money was just a means towards something so much bigger. In fact, he was willing to waste half of his income, half of his total wealth to give to the son, maybe knowing that one day the son would come back to him. Poor, but he would come back to him. And he had no problem throwing a celebration, spending even more money when this guy returned. What's the implication? Here's one that just jumps off the page to me. That life today matters more than the fear or the what if of what consequences might come. Right? This pandemic has caused us to fear. And here's the Father, right in the middle of all the consequences of what might happen with these economic situations. And the Father is just saying, hey, health, money, the ability to party and associate with each other, like those are all secondary to our connection. And by the way, I'm right here today for you, son. Both sons. I'm right here for you today. We get this picture that God somehow supersedes it all, and he's right here with you and me in the middle of it. All right, let's do one more, just for fun. The church. The church is changing. Of course, I'm thinking about it a lot because I'm a pastor. But the Durango Vineyard, I mean, we need to think about this. Church has been done a different way than it's ever been done. I mean, we've been at home, we've been separated, we've been disconnected. There hasn't been big public services. We haven't gotten to worship. I mean, what does this all mean? What do we learn from this? And for me, it comes back to the younger son. There are always those who are lost and needing to be found with their father. No matter what our world goes through, there are people lost right now, and we need to be a church. Man, I want to be a church that embraces the lost, the broken, the hurting, and those who are at the end of their rope. At the same time, there's always going to be the religious older son within us, the one that doesn't want to move, that doesn't like the party, that doesn't like change, and doesn't like doing whatever it takes to reach the lost and the broken. They're always going to be there with us. They're always going to be inside of us. And that's what brings us to the Father, the model of He comes to us too. He comes to all of us. He is the peaceful, non-anxious presence in the middle of it all, the one we need to save us, the one we ultimately need to come to. You know, earlier this year, when we were switching to home churches, I was thinking in my mind, maybe home church is going to make our church more like we take more ownership, you know? And there was one night where at my home group specifically, people were calling in sick, you know? I don't know if they were sick, they just weren't coming. And I was starting to feel frustrated, like, why am I doing this anyway? It seems like people don't care about it. That was the pity party I was throwing in my head. And I was walking out, actually, I remember I was carrying a bag of trash. I was getting ready to throw it away. And right as I was doing that, the Lord, I felt like He spoke to me and said, why are you trusting a program to do what only I can do? And then He whispered to me, only I can change the human heart. Only I can awake the souls. And that's where I find myself in the church. And that's what this passage reminds me of. At the end of the day, all I want to do is see God change lives. Whether I'm the older son or the younger son, based on the day, both, you know. I just want to come back to the Father and enter the party. I hope the same is for you. God bless you. All right, it's question time, and I'm really excited to see where this discussion goes. Let's start with this. Does God take positions on the most contentious subjects of our day? All right, here's the second question. Along with that, looking back at the life of Jesus, how did Jesus address these divisive topics? And the last questions, and this is a discussion about tactic. How do we engage in contentious discussions where we put Jesus above everything else? How do you think we can do that? God bless you. Have a great week. Enjoy your time. Take care.